Welcome. This is Dr. Michio Kaku, Professor of Theoretical Physics at the City College and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And this is Exploration. Every week on Exploration, we discuss the fascinating world of science and its impact on society. Well, with us today is John Pugliano, author of a very important new book. The book is called The Robots Are Coming, a human's survival guide to profiting in the age of automation. Now, usually when you read a book about robots, you think, oh my God, they're going to take away our jobs. They're going to take away our livelihood. What are we going to do about it? This book is different because it talks about specific occupations. Which occupations are going to be phased out because of technology and which jobs are going to flourish in the future. So this book is different from the other books, which are mainly doom and gloom. So, John, first of all, let me ask you a question. How did you first get involved with the whole question of automation? You're a money manager. You're the host of Wealth Steading Podcast. How did you get involved with robots?
Well, I've been involved with technology all my life. I grew up in western Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh in the early 60s and the early 70s. There was a time when they were closing down a lot of the steel mills and things, and I saw people losing their jobs to technology and also offshoring at that time. And this is the same time that computers were starting to come in. I started to get interested in that, and I've really just tracked it and followed it over my whole life.
Okay, well, we don't have blacksmiths anymore, but we don't cry about it. We don't have wagon makers anymore because a lot of those jobs went out the window, but new jobs opened up, for example, factory work. But let's talk about specific jobs now and how you see the trends going. First of all, jobs that are repetitive. For example, flipping hamburgers or pumping gas. What do you think about the future of those jobs that do repetitive work?
Yeah, the real key there is what you just mentioned, the repetitive jobs. Anything that's repetitive or predictable or that can be reduced to an algorithm, that consist of protocols and rules, things like that can be easily put into some type of a mathematical equation. Those are eventually going to be gone through artificial intelligence, through machine learning, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think things will... we have to remember that technology is a tool, a computer, a robot, an algorithm. These are all tools. And some of these particularly less demanding jobs or lower-level jobs, they'll free up humans to do things that they're better for.
Okay, now let's be specific. For example, in Japan, already you can go to a restaurant which is fully automated. A robot comes and takes your order, or there's a tablet right next to your table. You just punch it in, and the cook is a robot. The cook can make noodles in 1 minute and 29 seconds, and there's no humans involved. So what do you think, therefore, about the future of flipping hamburgers if already we have restaurants that are fully automated?
Yeah, I think those jobs are long gone. I mean, there's always going to be chefs. There's going to be people that use creativity and serendipity to create the perfect meal or the perfect dish. But if it's just a matter of taking a piece of meat and browning it on both sides for 3 minutes exactly or something, obviously robots are going to be able to do that much better. Japan is a leader, and for people that are interested, I'd encourage them to look towards Japan for technology. They're obviously innovating in that area because they're not only amazingly well in engineering electronics, but also because of their demographics. They don't have the labor force, and they need a lot of assistance taking care of their aging population. So they're turning much faster to robotics than we're seeing in the United States.
Now, in Japan, they actually have a hotel where the receptionist is a robot, and you have robot bellmen and bellwomen that take your luggage to your room. Now, the question is, however, where do humans belong in something like this if there's an emergency or something that pops up and you need advice? Where do humans fit into restaurant work and, for example, in a hotel?
Yeah, and not only just emergency work, but also the human relationship side of it, the emotional appeal and the human touch part of it. As a money manager, one of the reasons I look at automation or robotics now is to simply be able to judge the value of companies and, what their value will be in the future. One of the Fortune 500 companies that I think that could profit the most from robotics is a company like Starbucks. They're in that service sector. They're in the restaurant type business, and there's software now that could easily be, right off the shelf, could be put into the cafes and Starbucks to make coffee and cappuccino and all those things, and it would make it as good or better than any human's going to do it. And it would also free up the human from, sort of that drudgery of, and I don't want to, I know there's a lot of baristas that probably love their jobs, but it's a hard, demanding job. You have all these people wanting their coffee, they want it right away, and they've got to, mix the hot water and the steam and do all these things. A machine could easily do that. And it isn't that Starbucks would then just fire all their employees, but they could deploy those employees to different functions within the restaurant that are more customer facing, more friendly to the consumer, to make the experience even better. And that's what you're not going to get out of a robot. You're not going to get that human experience.
In fact, I think you're building up to something, that things are strictly repetitive. Those jobs are going to go out the window. But those jobs that involve human interactions, specialty jobs, emergency jobs, things that require specialized human interactions, those jobs may flourish in the future, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we up till now it's really talked about low-level jobs, but I really think that many of the lower-skilled jobs have already been taken out by automation over the last 30, 40 years. Again, that's what I saw as a kid growing up in Pittsburgh, as many of the mills and factory jobs shut down. But where I think this next wave is going to hit is going to be the professionals, the white-collar workers. And, for example, you take someone like a doctor, a physician. That's a very high-level job, highly compensated, very intelligent to have to do it. But there's also a great deal of repetitive, predictable type tasks in there that that we just talked about, and those can be reduced to an algorithm, and they can also be much better diagnosed now with the sensors and the type of diagnostic equipment that we have. It's going to take a lot of that out. So, for example, a doctor that maybe he's been diagnosing children and whether they have strep throat or ear infections. Well, we may come to a point in the not-too-distant future when your smartphone can diagnose that for you. And again, that doesn't mean we're going to get rid of the physician. That just means that doctor can then take his skills, his abilities, his knowledge, and his talents and start working more with humans to not just to diagnose their illnesses, but to help them, overcome the problems that we all have. Because if you look at our health, probably most of our diseases are self-inflicted anyways because of bad lifestyle choices or improper things that we do. So we could be working with people in the healing professions, not just to diagnose our diseases, but to help us not have them in the first place.
Okay, let's talk about the medical field. The population is aging. Many people think that there's going to be a tremendous demand for nurses, but let's talk about it specifically now. Let's take a look at X-rays, for example. Robots can now read X-rays better than any human. Illnesses that cannot be seen by the human eye can be spotted by robots, and robots can analyze thousands of X-ray diagrams within just a few minutes. But when it comes to life and death decisions, in terms of who's going to pull the plug, is surgery required, who's going to die, who can survive, that requires a human touch, right? What are your thoughts about X-rays, MRI scans that can be read by robots, but will humans have the ultimate say on life and death?
Well, I certainly hope so. But you're absolutely right. In terms of reading things like diagnostic charts, I mean, the machine learning, the pattern recognition, that's what this artificial intelligence is going to do so much better than we can do as humans. But I really think that we're going to see the technology emerge to where it does free up the doctors. For example, a man or a woman has to go to medical school to be a radiologist, and I don't know, they're probably studying an additional 4 to 8 years just to be able to see all those nuances and things that we can program a computer to do and replicate very quickly. So we don't have to waste the time of humans to go learn that. We can free those people up to do more interactive things. And like you're talking about, to help us in those life and death decisions and to really help us with the emotional side, which is really the critical part of our health.
Now, you mentioned Japan. With an aging population, there's going to be a tremendous demand for nurses. So in Japan, there's also robo-nurse. That is a robot that delivers medicines at 4 o'clock in the morning, reminds patients of certain things they have to do. But don't you still have to have the human touch? Nurses to change bedpans, nurses to become counselors, nurses to move patients around and to have very specific kinds of recommendations. So where do humans fit into the nursing profession?
I think that that's an example of where humans can flourish the most. Because if you talk to someone who's been in a hospital, they almost always say, they may like their doctor and all, but they almost always say that they love their nurses. You know, if they've had good experience in a hospital, they'll come out and say, the nurses took such good care of me. And that's because of not only the service aspect of it. Sure, someone's got to empty the bedpans and things, and I do think that those type things are going to be progressively more automated. The administering of drugs, the cleaning of the hospital with the patient, those things are going to be more robotic, as we are seeing in Japan. But the part that's really going to matter is that nurse that comes in, a male or female nurse that comes in and just comforts the patient, explains what they're going through, helps them understand the procedures, why they're feeling a particular way. It's that reassurance that we get from dealing with humans that's never going to go away. And just real quickly, I'm going to divert, this thought just came into my mind. You know, with technology, we do romanticize certain things, and we can think back to, I remember my first Apple computer or something, and you liked it. But really, with technology, we're always trying to get something better. And when a new iPhone comes out, people will rush to get rid of their old one and spend $1,000 to get a new one because they want that new technology. And that's always going to change with technology. We're always going to want something better and want to get rid of the old technology. But it's not that way with humans. If you have that interaction with a human, whether it's your nurse or your doctor or your auto mechanic, you never tire of that relationship because you develop an emotional bond with them. You trust them. You go to them for mentoring and knowledge and experience. And that's what we're not, I don't think, ever going to have with computers and robots, no matter how good they get. We're always going to want the next best, fastest form of technology, but we're going to bond to our human relationship.
Okay, well, we seem to be building up to a point, and that is strictly repetitive jobs that can be done by simple computer codes like algorithms. Those jobs are going to be gone, but jobs that involve the human touch, human values, human understanding, life and death decisions, comforting of other humans, those jobs cannot be done by robots. So let's now take a few more professions and analyze it from that perspective. Travel agents, tourism. Baby boomers are getting older, and they have disposable income, and they want to retire and see the world. So, you can get a plane reservation on the computer right now. You don't need a human at all. But don't you need a human to get that touch? Specialized vacations, tour guides, special vacation packages. How do humans fit into the tourist industry?
Yeah, in tourism in particular, there's been a lot of travel agents that have gone the way of the horse and buggy over the last 20, 25 years. I can remember 25 years ago when I was traveling in business, I'd have to always use a travel agent. Obviously, I can do all that myself and very easily. But what you don't get from just a straight algorithm or a computer program is that human experience. I'm going to be in Italy in a couple weeks, and I'm not worried about booking my reservations or any of that part, but what I want to know is what places should I visit that are going to appeal to me, to the things that I like, to the things I'm interested in, and the way I'm going to find that is by interacting with other humans. And I think that's why you see the flourishing of things like podcasts or YouTube channels where not even necessarily professionals, but just regular everyday people are out there sharing their experiences, and that's how we're finding more and more about places that we want to go visit or places we want to see, It's because we see it on Instagram or we see it on Facebook, and it's not that an algorithm is showing us that. We're connecting with another individual human being that we think is of like mind or of a similar interest to us, and we want to, share in the same experience that they're having.
Okay, now let's take a look at lawyers. Many people think that doctors and lawyers are impervious to automation, but no. Robots are coming to the hospital. Robots are also coming into the law firm. For example, paralegals have to look up precedents and cases, while robots can be search engines and do it much faster than a paralegal. So where do humans fit into the law profession?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of that, the drudgery, the mundane jobs in the legal system go away. The paralegals, we're seeing a much less demand for paralegals, and even newly educated lawyers are finding a harder time getting their first position, because those were the people that were hired to do the grunt work. They were hired to come in and study the cases, review the literature, and present that to the key attorneys. Well, now that can be done mostly through algorithms. And again, really, this is nothing new. You go back to, I believe it was probably about the late 50s, early 60s, that LexisNexis was really a software designed specifically for the law firms. And that's evolved over the years. But, I mean, it goes back that far. But we've got to the point now where pattern recognition, machine learning can go in and review these cases and start to really replace the human drudgery of it. However, again, that doesn't mean that we're not going to need attorneys. We're going to need them for more the human and the emotional touch side of it, where they can present a case before a judge, or they can make an emotional appeal to the jury, or they can be experts in selecting who sits on a jury, and different advisors and experts within the testimony side of the case. That's where the human effort will be put forth. And again, we'll use the computer as a tool. We'll use the robot as a tool to research the old cases. Humans won't have to waste their time on that, so they can spend their time building the case, deciding how they're going to present it to the jury, and appealing to the judge. That's the side that's going to matter, because as you mentioned with the life and death case of in healthcare, who's going to make the life and death cases? Well, same thing with the judicial system. We're not going to have an algorithm determining who's innocent and guilty. It's going to be a judge and a jury, and they're going to make those decisions based on human emotions.
So once again, applying the rule, the drudgery will be done by robots, drudgery that is repetitive, requires search engines and things like that, data processing. But when it comes to humans, arguing to a judge, arguing to a jury, understanding changing mores, understanding the emotional makeup of a jury, all that requires a human. And now let me ask you about my job. I'm a professor, and some people say, well, gee, professor, aren't your jobs going to go out the window? Because after all, we have e-courses. You can get on the web and download master courses from famous professors at prestigious universities. So, in the future, won't professors be out of a job? What are your thoughts?
Well, I do think that the education system is going to be one of the industries that does probably change the most in the next, say, 10 to 20 years. And artificial intelligence, robotics is going to have a lot to do with that. However, and I also think that maybe the traditional lecture is dead. Just getting up at a podium and lecturing or whatever at the blackboard, that's probably going to go away. However, the importance of professors and educators is going to be, I think, actually magnified, because they have the ability to be mentors. And they have also the ability to, in the past, you can only teach a classroom of so many people. Now, with the benefits of the Internet, and as we get onto the Internet of Things, we're going to be able to have these people that are excellent teachers, these people that can relate to their students, they can be mentors. They're going to be able to open that service up to not only just a classroom of people, but literally to people all around the world.
Now, professors usually rely on memorization for testing the students. You have to memorize the periodic chart. You have to memorize the amino acids and things like that. But isn't that going to go out the window? Because in the future, the Internet will be, for example, in your contact lens. You'll simply blink, and see the periodic chart, blink and see all the amino acids right there in your contact lens. So in the future, won't memorization cease to become the mainstay of education? And professors, as you mentioned, are going to be more like career guidance counselors, mentors, grading homework, giving individual advice, right?
I think so. And yeah, the whole memorization is, I do think, is going to go away. And to an extent, I've some people have criticized me in the past when I've said things like, you're actually, it's not that you're not going to have to be as smart in the future. It's just that the skill sets will be different. And I've been criticized by some people on that, but I said, look at this, I know how to add and subtract and multiply and things, but I do rely a great deal on calculators or on spreadsheets. I don't go and do the long division on paper anymore, right? I can have a spreadsheet do that for me. So I think we're going to, as these things get better, we're going to use those as more and more tools where we can take the drudgery out of memorization. Because, if we need to know a specific fact, we can go look it up. It's going to be right at our fingertips. As you even mentioned, having something built into a vision system, maybe built into a contact lens or something. I don't think that that's necessarily that far in the future. And right now, a lot of the virtual reality is limited to gaming. But where I see that big potential coming is in helping people do tasks. I mean, you think of a surgeon. Right now, that surgeon has to be trained for years or decades on how to do a particular procedure, and they have to be very skilled and be able to work under pressure as they're operating on someone. Well, I think virtual reality is going to make that a much easier process in the future, to where the surgeon will be aided, as they already are in some instances. Where they'll know the anatomy of the person is laid out in front of them, because they'll be able to visualize it through some type of virtual reality machine, and the robot will help guide their hand, or they'll be guiding the arm of the robot. Which again, we're seeing this technology already come into place with products that are on the marketplace today.
Okay, well, let's summarize what we've done so far. We looked at many jobs where the drudgery, the repetitive work, will be done by machines, because robots, after all, are adding machines. We forget that. They're adding machines, and that's what they do better than us. They do repetitive tasks, but tasks that involve human interactions, to be a mentor, to be a guide, to argue to another person in front of a jury. All these jobs have to be done by humans interacting with other humans, making decisions that are important for people's lives, life and death. Now let's shift gears and talk about service workers and also manual laborers, carpenters and gardeners and plumbers. The question is, can a robot fix a broken toilet? Yes or no? What are your thoughts?
Well, anytime I would say no to something, someone will point me to a link on the website where it shows that something it can't happen. Listen, I think that things like robots will be able to do many of these tasks, just like dishwashers do in our homes today. But when you have a clogged drain, when you have a short that's somewhere in the wiring in your house, I think for the foreseeable future, it's going to require a human to come in and fix those kind of things. And again, not to say that they won't be aided by robotics or aided by artificial intelligence. It'll maybe make the diagnostics of it better, and even the servicing of cleaning pipes and things will be easier done, because you have a robotic pipe cleaner, something that's going to aid the individual. But there are still going to be people in the service sector. They're going to come in. Those industries are going to flourish. One of these things we talked about is repetitive and predictable. Well, with maintenance or with dealing with Mother Nature, things aren't always repetitive or predictable. We don't know where the next lightning strike is going to happen. So we're still going to need electricians to go out and repair things that have been damaged by an electrical strike, or we're going to need firemen to go out and put out fires in the brush fires in the mountains of California because of an electrical strike there. These things that are unpredictable, that are decentralized, they're going to still need human intervention for a long, long time.
Okay, well, the United States Pentagon, which championed the Internet, in fact, and GPS and many other marvels, the United States Pentagon had a contest. They wanted a robot that could clean up the mess at Fukushima, where we had 3 raging meltdowns, and the accident is still in progress, by the way. And they wanted a robot that could sweep the floor, turn a valve, operate a car, and the results are laughable. Go to the Internet, look up the DARPA challenge, and you see all these robots basically flipping over, winding up on their backs like a bug, unable to come back up on their own feet, and it was pathetic. So in some sense, haven't we been brainwashed by Hollywood into thinking that Terminator robots are around the corner, when actually robots have the intelligence of a bug, an insect, a cockroach? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the technology has come in an extraordinary way, and it is amazing what it can do, but it has been Hollywoodized to the points that you're making about the Fukushima cleanup. I mean, you can see that just to do the simplest skill that a human can do, it's a great challenge to get the computing power to get a robot to do it. On the other hand, though, again, if you put the two together and you take a human, like we're talking about with surgery, there are surgical companies out there that have devices now that the surgery is not done completely by the robot, but the surgeon is aided by the robot. So it's combining the surgeon's skills and knowledge with the precision and the exactness that you would see, from a laser printer. And it's the combining of the two that I think is going to be the big revolution that's going to come forward in the near term.
Well, that concludes the first half of our interview with John Pugliano, author of a new book, The Robots Are Coming, about the future of the job market. So stay tuned now for the second half of Exploration when we continue a discussion of the job market of the future. Which jobs will thrive? Which jobs will become obsolete in the future? Stay tuned. Welcome. Once again, this is Dr. Michio Kaku, Professor of Theoretical Physics at the City College and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, and this is the second half of Exploration. Now, before the break, we were talking about the limitations of technology, but let's flip the coin a bit and talk about the benefits of technology, such as, for example, driverless cars. What are your thoughts?
The other side of this, too, is that in very controlled circumstances, robots and automation are amazing. I think we're still a ways from getting driverless cars, autonomous cars on the highway because of all the intricacies of it. But at the same time, you can look at a company like Rio Tinto, which is a mining company. They have operations in Australia for, I think it's been the last decade now. They've been using autonomous trucks, basically these big, huge trucks that can haul ore in and out of the mines, and it's very little human interaction involved in that. But they control everything. They control the roads. They have all the infrastructure. It's all a very controlled environment. And so yes, they've been able to do that and literally ship billions of tons of ore out of these mines with very little human interaction. But it's also a very closed-loop system. It's not what we're going to see on the interstate anytime soon.
And also things like picking up the garbage. You figure that every piece of garbage is different. You have to mentally sort out in your head what is garbage that's dangerous, what is garbage that falls apart, what is garbage that you can haul off. And robots, being adding machines, do not have the pattern recognition ability to differentiate thousands of pieces of garbage to figure out what they are and make instantaneous decisions. So don't you think, therefore, that sanitation workers, not to mention carpenters, electricians, plumbers, they'll have a place in the society of the future?
Oh, absolutely, and it really comes down to that pattern recognition that you just mentioned. A robot that's emptying a trash bin, it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to rationalize what they're seeing, where a human in an instant can sort it. And yes, we do have facial recognition software and pictorial software that's come a long way, but a human will be able to, a human waste worker will be able to look at a piece of trash and say, that's a scrap of paper or that's a $100 bill. They'll be able to instantly recognize that, and we're still a long way from having computers be able to do that. And then the other side of that too is the whole creativity that's involved with this. The artificial intelligence is only as good as it's programmed to be, and it's going to only work under the circumstances that it's programmed for. And while it does learn, we talk about machine learning, it's only learning within the context of the rules and the protocols and the way it's been programmed. It's not going to think outside that box, and that's by design. You don't want it moving out of the domain that you're that you have it working in. For example, if you had a garbage man that's coming to deliver the garbage and he notices that the house is on fire, well, he's going to call 911 or he's going to run up and see if he can save someone from the building, because he can multifunction. He can think beyond the task that he's assigned to do. It's going to be very difficult to get robots to do that anytime in the future.
Well, let's talk about Hollywood. Hollywood gives us RoboCop and the robot soldier like in Terminator. But, well, I was a soldier once. At the height of the Vietnam War, I was in the United States Infantry. And one thing that our drill sergeant would always beat into our heads is that only humans can occupy territory. That is, the Air Force can pulverize the enemy's defenses, destroy a lot of the enemy infrastructure, but if you want to hold and occupy territory, that requires a human. Only humans understand all the intricacies of the thousands of decisions you have to make in terms of occupying enemy territory. And so robot soldiers are just out the window. Not to mention RoboCop. Every crime is different. You have to understand the thinking of the criminal. You have to outwit the criminal. You have to put yourself in the position of the criminal. And none of these things can be done by robots. So what are your thoughts about Hollywood and RoboCop and Robo-Soldier?
Yeah, the Hollywoodization of it, I totally disagree with. But again, I do think that the military and intelligence services and police force are going to use automation as tools. And you can see even with the Air Force, the use of drones and unmanned flying vehicles, that's been immense, and it's going to continue to grow. We do need boots on the ground. We're always going to need a human to be part of the chain. But with something like a fighter pilot, it takes years to train a person to be a fighter pilot and millions of dollars to train them and keep them proficient in that task. There are things that we can, where we can go with drones and unmanned vehicles where they can, even if they're flown by a human, they can be flown by someone that's looking at a screen or some type of a monitor, and the training of that individual can be done in maybe a fraction of the amount of time it would take to actually be the pilot, because the pilot is in the aircraft. The pilot's exposed to all the environmental, pulling G's and all the environmental forces, maybe lack of oxygen and things that they would encounter while they're flying in the air, where if you can get a human to operate it remotely from an air-conditioned building somewhere, it's much easier to do and at a lower cost. So again, these things are going to facilitate the mission as opposed to totally replacing the human from it.
Okay, well, let's summarize where we are. So far, we've learned that everyday repetitive jobs are going to go out the window, but jobs that involve the human in touch, human interactions, human judgment, convincing humans, life and death decisions, they'll be done by humans. And not to mention the fact that when you talk about semi-skilled, non-repetitive work, gardening, police work, carpentry, electricians, plumbers, robots would have a hard time fixing a broken toilet because every toilet it breaks differently, and it requires tremendous amount of manual dexterity, pattern recognition, which robots don't have. Now let's talk about the third major category, and that involves creativity and innovation and a sense of artwork. Isn't it true that robots are very bad at innovating, at creating new ideas, and that robots cannot write poetry? They can try, of course, but robots are very bad at acting, writing a novel, doing scientific discoveries. What are your thoughts now about the next level of jobs which require human creativity?
Yes, and that's the key to the whole thing, and that's really where I see the value of humans coming into play. It is that creativity. It's that the emotional feeling side of it. It's the passion part that we're never going to have that from something that's purely robotic, because it's always going to be limited to what they're programmed to do. You know, can they write a song or create music or poetry? Well, they can to the degree that they've been programmed to have a certain pattern, and they know that this is the right syntax, or they know that this rhymes. But to really have and they'll be able to mimic, I guess is a good way to say it. Yes, they will be able to mimic, but it's the creating of the new. And so when a robot can mimic of the new, even more important than it was, because humans do want new things. And so we're going to see, I think, the human services really thrive and increase in the future as humans can use machines to take care of the mundane tasks, the repetitive tasks. We're going to be able to focus on the creative, the exploratory, going beyond the bounds that we've currently been limited by. And that exploration is key. I mean, you think of getting out in space and the things that the tech companies are doing now, and everybody from Elon Musk to Jeff Bezos, they all want to get into space. And of course, robots and technology and algorithms and computers are going to be important to get us out there. But ultimately, it's going to be the humans that do the exploration in terms of deciding where to go and what's out there and what we want and what the needs are for.
Now, Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of England, liked to say that England derives more revenue from rock and roll than it does from the coal mining industry. Now, when you think of a British worker, you think of the British coal miner. And yet, rock and roll, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and what have you, they generate more revenue for merry old England than the coal industry. So isn't it true that the creative arts, that is intellectual capital, is gradually going to exceed the benefits of commodity capital like coal and gold and things like that, that products of the mind cannot be mass-produced? Products of the mind simply cannot be done by robots, yet maybe for many decades we won't be able to have a creative robot that can write poetry. But the point is that innovation and creativity, that's going to be more and more the currency of the future. But what are your thoughts?
No, absolutely, and we see that in the present day economy. If we look at petroleum and energy companies and what share of the economy, or like the S&P 500 that they make up now versus 20 years ago, I think if you looked at the oil and oil exploration companies like ExxonMobil and Chevron, British Petroleum, they were making up, I think 15, close to 20% of the economy. If you go back, say 20 years ago, 25 years ago, last time I looked, I think the petroleum sector was making up less than 5% of the S&P 500 in terms of earnings and revenue. What's that been replaced by? The FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, Netflix. That's where the money is, and that's precisely what you talked about. It's the creativity. It's not just the technology behind these companies, but it's the human creativity of the mind and of the experience that is creating the economic demand, not the old raw materials and nuts and bolts of the past economy.
Okay, John, we've said a lot of bad things about Hollywood, how they exaggerate the power of robots, killer robots, robots that are going to take our lives away. However, let's talk about Hollywood and the entertainment industry. The economy of the state of California is comparable to all of France. That's how much the California contributes to the economy, not just in terms of Silicon Valley, but also in terms of entertainment. So isn't it true that robots cannot make us laugh? Robots can recite poetry. They can even mangle poetry to a degree. But robots cannot become convincing actors, actresses, and create new ideas. And so some people think that entertainment could be huge in the future because entertainment requires the essence of who we are. What is funny? What thrills us? Robots are clueless because robots are adding machines. But what are your thoughts?
The same things apply to Hollywood. We've seen, if you look at a company like Disney, you go back to when Walt first started that company, he had to literally employ thousands and thousands of artists that had to painstakingly draw every frame of every cartoon. And now we fast forward to the last 10, 20 years or so, Pixar, all these other type of animation type companies have come in to where we still have those same Disney movies that we love and engage with, and they are facilitated and made better and made faster with computers and robots and algorithms and things that can make them faster. But we still need that human element to direct that energy and to program them and to make them relate to the things that we want to see. It's funny you bring up Hollywood. I was just doing some research on something the other day, and I'm not a big consumer of pop culture, so I don't pay attention to a lot of particularly modern things. But I was having to notice some things that they're doing just some research on late night TV and comedians, and I was looking back to the days that I can remember. Johnny Carson was like the great late night comedian of when I was a kid, and I think before him it was Jack Parr, it was Johnny Carson, then it went to Jay Leno and David Letterman, and then all the people we have today. But when I was looking at all those people's biographies, all those comedians' biographies and late-night show hosts, and none of them that I can recall had any type of family background that was involved in entertainment or movies or comedy or anything like that. I mean, whether it was Johnny Carson or Jay Leno or some of the guys that are doing it modern day now, Jimmy Kimmel, whoever, they all came out of kind of regular middle class, middle America backgrounds, and yet they rose up to be these very successful entertainers that made it through the process and got those late night shows, and they did it because of their creativity, because of those experiences they had of just being everyday Americans. That's what made them funny. That's what made them relate to other people. They weren't from the Hollywood culture. They weren't programmed with any kind of an algorithm from Hollywood, and none of their parents or none of their background were show business people. They were just everyday people that experienced life, and that's why I think they relate to us, why we think they're funny, and why we enjoy watching them so much.
And it's created a multi-billion-dollar industry, the envy of other countries. Other countries try to get their own Hollywood off the ground, but they never quite succeed. And so Hollywood is a tremendous generator of income, economic activity, not to mention the record industry and other forms of entertainment. Now let me ask you about another area of creativity, and that is science. I'm a scientist, and many people come up to me and they say, "Ha, Professor Smarty Pants, won't computers put you out of business? Computers can add equations much faster than you. And so won't the future simply be a gigantic scientist robot that creates new theories?" And I tell them, now wait a minute. A computer is just an adding machine. It just adds faster than me, but it's not creative. It cannot come out with new ideas. And I work in something called string theory, which uses supernumbers, which can't even be used on a computer. Computers cannot calculate on supernumbers at all. And as a consequence, for my profession, computers are almost useless. So let's talk about the creative sciences. To create new things like DNA molecules and stuff like that, well, computers can help. But to create new theories, doesn't that require a human?
Oh, absolutely. And again, we look at the things that computers have done to help us aid in these things. We couldn't have edited a gene sequence like we have if we didn't have these algorithms and these fast operating computers. But at the same time, the computers aren't helping us interpret that data. It's the human mind that has to really look at it and see the patterns that relate to the instances that we're interested in. It's the mind that can have this multidisciplinary function that can understand, say, the genome and then relate that back to cancer research and say, oh, this is that link that we've been looking for. I don't think we're anywhere near having a computer or an algorithm be able to do that with machine learning or any time in the future. I mean, I can remember back to my undergraduate days where we had gotten our first weather station, and it was recording things on a microprocessor, and it was so much better than what we had on the old weather station that was all analog. But again, it was just a tool. It was just a matter of, it gave us the ability to collect the data better and faster and more of it, but we still needed the humans to go in and interpret that to what it really meant in terms of what that weather patterns meant to the environment, or how that was affecting the local economy, or how it was impacting nature. We couldn't get a computer to do it then, and I don't think we're going to get one to do it now. They'll come up with models, but again, it's only based on what we program them with. And in your field, if you're doing string theory now, but if your computer was operating on Newtonian physics, it just wouldn't work. It's the humans that always create these next links, and that's what's going to happen. It's happened in the past. That's what's going to happen in the future.
Okay, now let's talk about the future. Given the fact that robots are making inroads, especially in work that is dull, dirty, dangerous, the 3 Ds, dull jobs that are repetitive, dirty jobs like cleaning up waste chemicals and dangerous things, and also dangerous work that involves explosives. So there is a place for dull, dirty, dangerous performing robots that do a lot of the drudgery. But now let's talk about the future. There's a book which hit the New York Times bestseller list talking about the future of society with automation, saying that in the future there's going to be, quote, a useless class. A huge chunk of humanity will simply be out of a job because they cannot compete with robots, and therefore they're going to be useless. And what do we do with the useless class? Well, the same thing could have been said 100 years ago with the coming of machines and the coming of oil and the coming of modern-day technology. People were saying, look at all these peasants. What are all these peasants going to do? I mean, they're just going to be useless in the future. Well, education made a big difference. So do you think, therefore, that education is going to be a top priority as nations realize that more and more of their workers could become unemployed unless they become educated to handle this technology? What are your thoughts?
Yes, and in terms of a useless class, I have too much faith in humanity to think that life is going to be useless. But I do recognize the fact that there is going to be a transition period needed, and I think that that's why you do see a lot of people talking about universal basic income and guaranteed minimum income and things like that, because we're going to see probably a lot of worker displacement. And as I mentioned, I don't think it's just going to be in the low-skilled jobs. I think it's going to hit white-collar and professional workers as well, to the extent that their work is routine and predictable. However, getting back to your point, though, there is great value in humanity that we're not going to have in a computer or in a robot or in automation. And the fact that we have more of these dangerous jobs done or these routine jobs done by a computer, that will bring down the cost. I mean, we're already seeing the deflationary pressures occurring over the last decade for sure. The more we apply this technology, the lower cost products will be. I think that it's going to help us to not only access things, but also, as you mentioned, things like education. My grandfather was an Italian immigrant. He came to this country, in the early 1920s, and he had a third-grade education. The man was brilliant. The man had great knowledge, probably one of the smartest people I think I've actually ever met, but he wasn't formally educated. He only had a third-grade education. That limited what he could do. If he could benefit from the things that we have today, the Internet and all the technology, he was such a self-learner, he would have been able to improve his lot in life much better than he was able to do in 1930. Because, he just didn't have those tools and that ability back then. People in the future are going to have those things. We're going to have access to knowledge, access to information, and we're going to be able, I believe, to link up the mentors and the teachers that we need to help with each individual. I mean, think of the advances that have been made by people with handicaps and disabilities. If you were blind 100 years ago, in a lot of ways, people would have thought you were useless. I mean, you look at the struggles that someone like, any handicapped person would have encountered 50, 100 years ago. Today, I mean, we have so much technology that can aid these people. It can help them overcome whatever their physical limitation is, but they can use their mind and their creativity to make products and services that make us all better.
Okay, well, the press recently talked about the battle of the billionaires, where Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook squared off against Elon Musk of SpaceX. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook said that artificial intelligence is going to be great. It'll generate new jobs, new opportunity, new economic potential for those countries that can grasp artificial intelligence. While Elon Musk says, wait a minute, one of these days the robots could take over. They pose an existential risk for humanity. Now, let me tell you my point of view, and then I'll ask you for your point of view. I think in the short term, that is for many decades to come, I think Zuckerberg is right. Artificial intelligence will eliminate lots of jobs, but it create new industries in the process. For example, your automobile in the future will be part of the robotics industry. The robotics industry will be bigger than the automobile industry because your car will become a robot. You'll talk to your car. You'll argue with your car. Your car will park itself, drive itself. Your car itself will become a robot. But in the long term, that is maybe by the end of the century, who knows for sure, then robots, well, you have to be careful. At that point, robots may become self-aware. And at that point, we should put a chip in their brain to shut them off if they have murderous thoughts. But that's not for many a decade, and we have plenty of time to prepare. But what are your thoughts on this question?
I worry a lot less about automation and robots taking over any time in the near future, and I guess even 100 years from now, we're always going to have the human thinking the next step, and so to the extent that robots will be taking over one area, well, I think we're going to have humans on the other side creating more robots and more artificial intelligence to counteract it. Kind of reminds me of the cybersecurity. To me, if I was a young person just starting out, that would be an area that I would want to focus on is cybersecurity. And, can that be automated? Can that be improved with machine learning? Absolutely. But the criminals that use cyber attacks and any of that type of theft through technology, they're always going to try and stay one step of the game because they're smart and they're going to find a way to safe crack and move around whatever type of technology there is today. And so you're always going to have a human on the other side of that to counteract it. So, I'm not worried about the dystopian side of automation, but I do agree that there's good and bad. It's kind of the best of times, the worst of times. I think that the automation is going to lower the cost of many things. It's going to be a tool that facilitates many opportunities for us, but at the same time, it is going to displace people, and that's going to be a short-term problem.
I'm afraid that's it for Exploration. Once again, our special guest today was John Pugliano, author of an exciting new book, The Robots Are Coming, A Human's Survival Guide to Profiting in the Age of Automation. So once again, this is Dr. Michio Kaku for Exploration. Join us every week when we discuss the impact of technology on society. Good day.